Hi, everyone. Welcome to part two of our Lacey Peterson segment of Stop Who Does That? True Crime Podcast with Jackie and Jenna. I'm Jackie,
And I'm Jenna.
and we are diving deep into what the LA Innocence Project is saying about Scott Peterson and why they're defending him in his appeal process. What do they have that we don't already know about? What was not presented in the courtroom back in 2004? What did the neighbors see? What about this other pregnant woman who turned up in the San Francisco Bay as a torso and a missing baby? Did you know about any of those things? If you didn't, we're going to get into it right now. We're going to start off by talking about Evelyn Hernandez. And if this is the first time you're hearing of this woman, buckle up because there's a lot of similarities between her and Laci. So tell us about her, Jenna.
Okay, so Evelyn Hernandez lived in the same kind of area of California that Lacey Peterson lived in. She was 24 years old and she was also pregnant. She was scheduled to give birth very shortly before her disappearance. She vanished mysteriously in San Francisco in 2002. She was last heard from on May 1st of 2002. Her body was found on July 24th, about 4 months after she went missing, just like Laci. Her body was also found, just like Laci, in the San Francisco Bay. In addition, just like Laci, her body was missing its head and several limbs. The difference is the unborn baby of Evelyn was never found. Shortly after Evelyn's disappearance and body being found is when Laci went missing. The circumstances here with Evelyn Hernandez are eerily similar to what we know about Laci's disappearance and her body being found. So we're going to dive into this a little bit here. Jackie, if you could bring up her picture to show everyone. So they were relatively the same age, from the same area. They were both 7 to 8 months pregnant, and they both went missing, and their bodies were found 4 months later
In the same
in the
place.
same bay, in the same manner, missing the head and limbs.
In the same calendar year.
Yes. Yes. So the police and the media never really reported on Evelyn's case. And this could be for several different reasons. Evelyn was Hispanic and Laci was white. So could it have been missing white woman syndrome? Perhaps. But the stories were so eerily similar that this just very mind blowing that the police never put these two together. Jackie, if you were a detective, wouldn't you think, oh, gee, we just had a missing pregnant person in the
Not that long
same
ago.
bay, in the
Well,
same.
and also they kind of look similar too. I mean, I know Laci, I assume she was Italian of some kind of Italian descent, but her and Evelyn, they have similar features, dark
Yeah,
hair, face. They both were petite and very
yeah,
pregnant.
yes.
That screams to me like maybe we should look into a serial perpetrator here. Or maybe there's a certain type of person they're going after, or maybe it's somebody stealing babies, right? Those things do happen. And for that to happen in the same year and the bodies recovered in the same way really stood out to me because, Jenna, I did do some research on other missing pregnant women in the San Francisco area, and there were several. But when I dug deeper into those cases, it was apparent that there was a perp caught, and it was usually the father of the baby or a romantic relationship. It was very obvious what had happened in those cases and that the ages of the victims were kind of all over the place. There were different circumstances leading up to it, and the bodies were found in different ways. However, with Evelyn, I even said to Jenna offline, I'm like, this one was spot on exactly like Lacey's. Head arms, legs missing, only a torso washes up. What are the odds of that?
I mean, I don't think you could get much more similar, Jackie, and it's not like they were both shot in the back of the head. They were both pregnant and
Mhm.
their bodies were found in a body of water in the same manner. It's a very obscure cause of death. It's not like your typical stabbing or shooting like you can see.
No.
You even that would be weird because they were both pregnant. And the fact that the detectives never looked into this and in that area with the other missing pregnant women.
Mhm.
What we learned through some of Scott's statements about the neighborhood was becoming unsafe,
Mhm.
and there was some homeless, there was vagrants, kind of prowling around, and Lacey didn't like that.
Mhm.
And I can only imagine Evelyn, in the same type of area. Isn't just a one neighborhood
Yeah.
thing. It was probably going on in that whole general area. So,
Who knows?
are we just gonna not look into that because it could be a homeless person? I don't know.
Well, and also she had a 5-year-old son as well who also went missing at the same time. So whoever this is willing to pray after a pregnant woman with another child
Yeah, and
and
what
make them
happened
all go bye-bye.
into the sun,
Make them all
and
disappear.
where's the sun? They
They
is
never
there
could find the 5-year-old son, and they never found the baby that was in her belly. They don't know if, Evelyn gave birth before she died or if the baby dislodged from her abdomen in the water like what happened to Lacey.
I just think there's something bigger going on here, much bigger than this and
Yeah.
Scott. And they don't want it getting out. I believe police have covered this up. And like we read, there are so many other missing pregnant women from the San Francisco
Mhm.
area that there's something being covered up here.
Well, in addition to Evelyn being missing around the same time, same MO, I mean, they even looked similar. We went through a lot of the documentation from the
Mhm.
LA Innocence Project to kind of see what other things they're asserting as evidence that Scott didn't do this. And they did uncover new evidence not presented at trial that they believe undermines the original conviction. They argue that Scott Peterson was denied due process and a fair trial. I mean, with all the media coverage, Jenna, I was arguing with my sister about this yesterday, when I told her what we were gonna be doing, and, she said, "Well, how is it he was at the marina and then her body was found in the bay?" And I said, "They were talking about him being at the marina early on in the
Mhm.
media coverage, so even if you kept Lacey captive for months, you know where to dump her body to frame him." So
Exactly.
that's one of the things that the LA Innocence Project is focusing on is like how much of this was unfair to him in the media coverage, how much got blown up out of proportion. And also, they have witness statements, scientific evidence, and theories about potential suspects and crime elements. In April 2025, just to give you a recap, they did file a writ of habeas corpus petition with the California Court of Appeals, seeking a new trial or overturning the conviction based on this new evidence. As of June 2nd, 2025, the California Courts of Appeal denied the habeas petition filed by Peterson's team, meaning that his request for a new trial based on the LA Innocent Project's arguments was not granted at that stage. However, their efforts didn't stop there. The LA Innocence Project then filed another habeas corpus petition in the San Mateo County Superior Court in August 2025, so just 4 months ago, changing the multiple claims, citing new evidence. This refiles many of the arguments the appeal court said needed to start in the lower courts. The petition is pending a response by the Superior Court, which has up to 60 days to act, but there's been no report yet on these decisions
Mhm.
that are pending right now. Prior to the LA Innocence Project filing, Peterson's team had some success obtaining limited DNA testing on specific pieces of evidence and accessing older evidence, but much of the broader testing they sought was denied by a judge. I went through a lot of the documentation, and there is a website that has all that the LA Innocence Project is posting with the courts, and it is a lot. It's over 300 pages.
Mhm.
In it, there is an affidavit from Scott Peterson signed 2 years ago. He gives you more insight and background into his life with Lacey. He addresses a lot of the things that were blown out of proportion. Like they tried saying that he strangled Lacey in the bed because a photo they took of the bed showed all these like lumps in the bed. And he's like, the cats like to jump up on the bed during the day and they'd leave imprints on the bed. So, like, little things like that kind of help give you more insight into their everyday life and reasonable logical explanations for some of the things that the police
Yeah.
may have blown out of proportion. But without getting into all of the documents that I read, I wanted to just report back to you guys the stuff that stood out to me the
Mhm.
most. And like we alluded to in part 1 of this series, we did talk about how you can find a expert witness on either side, prosecution or defense, and they're going to say whatever you want them to say. I don't want to be cavalier in saying that, but I say that because when you're paying somebody, do they feel they have an obligation to tell you what they want to hear? I don't know. I don't want to impeach these people's professional opinions and all the training that they do because they do submit their resumes, Jenna, to show what their credentials are when they're giving these professional opinions. And we have an affidavit from Dr. Peter Dublé. He was somebody who reviewed the cadaver report of Connor and his measurements based of his time of death. And he says here, based on the data published in these studies, I calculated Connor's gestational age at the time of death using Dr. DeVore's femur length of 64.5 millimeters. The new data shows that Connor most likely died between December 28th, 2002 and January 5th, 2003, and not, in my opinion, on December 23rd, as Dr. DeVore testified in the trial. In other words, Connor Peterson's date of death was most likely 5 to 13 days later than Dr. DeVore calculated based on the new data. So from what I gleaned, that this Dr. Peter Dublé, he went through all of Lacey's OBGYN appointment
Mhm.
notes, all of her fetal scans from like 8 weeks, 20 weeks, what have you, based on Connor measuring in the 50th percentile for most of the pregnancy. He then calculated based on the femur length of Connor at the time he was found to be consistent with a gestational age that was later than they thought initially
Yeah.
at the time of trial.
Like you're saying, one doctor saying one thing, another doctor is
Right.
saying something different, and it's pretty different. So, how could that be?
Right. And that's why you have to call into question, like, is it because the LA Innocence Project is asking him to do this? Is it true? I mean, I would imagine he truly believes this. It's his opinion. He's not going to put his medical license on the
Right.
line to lie, but it just does call into question in the medical community that sometimes things are not so black and white. And I think in my worldview, I don't think we'll ever know how old Connor was at the time of death. I don't think that's something we could really pinpoint based on the conflicting information that we're going to get here.
Seems like that would have been a starting point for
Right.
the detectives and the police. How about you start with his age of death and go backwards and say, wow, if he died between December 28th and January 2nd, well, then that clearly means Lacey was still alive at
Right,
that
and you
point.
guys were already on Scott's case that whole time, so what did he do? Have her locked up
It
somewhere?
did
I
because
mean,
it didn't line up with
right,
what they had tunnel vision, and
right,
as we know, when the police get tunnel vision, if something doesn't fit the narrative, they completely ignore it.
right. And also, Lacey and Connor didn't turn up for 4 months, just like Evelyn. Why does it take 4 months for those bodies to surface? Were they there the whole 4 months? Or that's the part I struggle with.
Why was Evelyn missing her head and limbs? We know from Devin Michaels' case, she cut off the head to try to get rid of evidence. Is that what these people did? Was that their MO? We'll cut the heads off and dispose of them because they couldn't determine a cause of death on
Right,
Lacey and Evelyn because they had no head and their bodies were decomposing from the water. So
right.
was it the same person doing this and that was their way of
Yes.
hiding? the cause of death.
How could Scott have disposed of her body in the same exact way that Evelyn's body was disposed of?
What are the odds?
What are the odds? Unless he's out there killing pregnant women.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
was
know.
just gonna say unless he killed Evelyn
Well, then they'll
and,
probably try to say that.
he's probably like, "Yeah, please don't ever bring up Evelyn. They're gonna try to get me on that too."
Yeah. So another thing that came up here, not only was Connor's gestational age a point of contention, but the LA Innocence Project also said that there was a robbery at the Medina house. So this was their neighbors across the street, and that people claim to have seen these robbers in the area. Scott even claims he recognized them when they were in the newspaper as seeing them in the area. Um Around the early fall time, he and Lacey report seeing some unsavory characters in their neighborhood, reputably coming from the airport district. And I'm not familiar with San Francisco, but the airport district sounded like it was like a high crime area,
Mhm,
a lot of meth dealers, things like
mhm.
that. So a lot of those people were kind of migrating into their neighborhood. And he does have an email from Lacey to someone in law enforcement complaining about these people in their area. I'm gonna try to find that.
You know what I was thinking, Jackie? Think of Home Alone at Christmas time when Harry and Marv are casing the neighborhood
Yes.
because everybody has gifts at home. There's lots of money, jewelry, presents. Could these robbers have been casing the neighborhood like that? And Scott and Lacey were more affluent. They knew she was pregnant. And if she was alone, she was an easy target.
Well, I'm trying to paint the picture here and like set the tone for like what's going on in their neighborhood because it's not really talked about that you've got suspicious people in their neighborhood.
Hmm.
Leading up to this, you've got a pregnant woman out there walking her dog, and then you've got this robbery that occurs, and there are claims that people saw Lacey confront these guys, and even the robbers may have admitted someone caught them. So here we go. And I'm just going to read an excerpt from Scott's declaration. And again, this is from 2023. It says here, and I'll share the screen with you guys so you can see it because I doubt many people are really looking at this. Nobody wants to hear what Scott has to say, but I think he gives more insight. Okay, so here he says, Lacey and I were both involved in La Loma neighborhood and community affairs, but Lacey was more active than I was, especially after she transitioned to a lighter work schedule. In mid 2002, Lacey signed us up to be part of the neighborhood committee called the La Loma Neighborhood Committee to stop the Encina connection. We attended committee meetings between July and October 2002. So this is while she's pregnant, before she goes missing. The committee was an organized effort to defeat a proposal to make changes to the neighborhood that would increase vehicle traffic. Lacey and I spent a few weekends videotaping traffic patterns on our quarter as part of that effort to show that the traffic was driving at dangerous speeds throughout our neighborhood, making it unsafe for children and pedestrians. There were a number of streets in our neighborhood that did not have sidewalks, including our street, which meant that people taking walks had to walk on the road in certain areas. I was proud of Lacey for her commitment to getting engaged in making our neighborhood and community better and safer. We were aware that there was an entirely different neighborhood on the other side of Yosemite Boulevard, a few blocks south of where we lived. It was an industrial area referred to as the Airport District because it was next to the Modesto Airport. There was some lower income housing there and what seemed to be a fair amount of criminal activity. I was not paying close attention at that time, but Lacey and I knew not to go south of Yosemite Boulevard when we went out to walk the dog. At the end of our street, there was a trail entrance to East La Loma Park, and we often saw people entering and exiting the park who appeared to be homeless or transient. When Lacey and I walked Mackenzie in the park, we sometimes saw transient or homeless people camping out. We would ask them to move along. It looked like the bike and foot traffic we saw on Covina, which is their street, was from people traveling to and from the airport district using our street to get to the trail entrance at the end of Covina to get down to East La Loma Park. So they're using their
Uh-huh.
street as a cut through from the
Yep.
airport district, which is like the, shady area to get to
Mhm.
the park.
Yeah.
Lacey and I were getting increasingly concerned about the unsavory foot traffic we were seeing on our street from people going to and from the park. It was of such concern to us that we discussed whether we would have purchased our home had we known about the concerning
Oh.
foot traffic. In the discovery I received from the prosecution after I was arrested, I learned that on September 5th and October 31st, Lacey did contact the city of Modesto and asked them to close the entrance to the park located at the end of our street because there was concerning and undesirable activity taking place there. The city of Modesto either ignored or denied her request because the park entrance was not closed to my knowledge. These emails below reflect Lacey's request and were known to the police because they're included in the police investigation file. So this is an email from Bob Ford to Dwayne Frederick. I would imagine this is an internal email to the city of Modesto. It
Mhm.
says, Dwayne, I received a phone call last week from Lacey Peterson of 523 Covina requesting a short section of chain link fence across the short finger of Covina adjacent to, I don't know, 533 Covina. This is located just north of Edgebrook Drive. The complaint has to do with undesirable activity and access to Thousand Oaks Park.
Mhm.
And here's another email where she's requesting that they have the vegetation trimmed, graffiti removed, and trash picked up. So she wants them to clean up this area. It's
Yeah, I
probably
mean, that's
disgusting.
really painting a different picture than
Yes,
when we talked about them buying the bungalow property, when they first bought it. It seems like the neighborhood quickly went downhill.
it did. And everyone's saying, oh, she was just out walking the dog. Like, we're not talking about in a nice neighborhood,
Right.
clearly, right?
Right.
Here's another one. He said there were a few other incidents that occurred on our street around that time. One night we were pulling into our driveway and we saw a man looking over our fence into our backyard. I asked him what he was doing and he came up with some excuse that he was trying to see if our dog was okay. I started walking toward him when he circled around me and took off. I recall mentioning the incident at the time to Brent Rocha, Lacey's brother, and his wife. Around that same time, Lacey told me what she heard what sounded like two women shouting at each other in front of our house. She went out and told them to stop fighting and that that kind of behavior would not be tolerated in our neighborhood. Get that right there shows you Lacey was not afraid to intervene.
Yeah. And this is painting a scary picture, especially for being pregnant, having to deal with neighbors and homeless people walking down your street trying to get to the park where you take a walk and walk your dog. That this sounds like they definitely were having second thoughts about living here.
I mean, it's not painting a good picture for a young woman like her to go out walking alone with the dog. And also, it does call into play the Medina robbery and the theory that she interrupted the robbery.
Yes.
This right
Yes.
here shows
Yes.
you she would have. And
Yes.
it says here, one police report I reviewed states that our neighbor heard that encounter. So they heard Lacey yell at those women. And on December 30th, after Lacey went missing, he told the police about it. I know that Lacey was intent on keeping our neighborhood safe, and she was not shy about it.
Yes,
So,
how many she was speaking up to people, and it would not have been out of character for her to confront somebody if she saw them breaking in to a home or leaving someone else's home with stuff. And also,
mhm,
this paints a picture of Scott seemingly being a stand-up guy. He's saying, "What are you doing at my house?" He's checking out the property before they pull into the driveway. It does seem like he
mhm,
he cared about Lacey and was being a husband in that sense. He was protecting her
yeah.
by confronting these people in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think they realized, like, this isn't what we thought this neighborhood was. And then another thing that he revealed was about Lacey's flip-flops here.
Mhm.
This is really important. The rendering below is a depiction of the flip-flops that Lacey generally kept on the back stoop. We joked about them being her Nova Lee flip-flops from the movie Where the Heart Is. In the movie, Nova Lee is abandoned in a Walmart parking lot and she buys a cheap plastic pair of flip-flops at Walmart. We had an inside joke about them that she could not go out in public with them on. In that movie, Nova Lee was pregnant with the flip-flops. Remember that movie, Jenna?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that would make sense why he was like, "You can't go out in public with them on being pregnant," right? She wore them around the pool and the backyard. Our neighbor, Judge Cordova, told my defense investigator, Carl Jensen, that he had found a pair of women's sandals on the morning of December 25th on the corner of our street. Mr. Jensen asked me if any of Lacey's flip flops were missing, and I told him that her Nova Leap flip flops were missing from the stoop where she was abducted.
Yeah.
Mr. Jensen had an artist create an image below to show to me. As I recall, Lacey's flip flops were a bit more orange than pictured here, but I believe the flip flops that our neighbor, Judge Cordova, saw at the end of the block and pointed out to various police officers belonged to Lacey. Look at this. This is where their house is, and this
Mhm.
is where they found the sandals.
Well, that's alarming.
Not until a year after Lacey was abducted did anyone investigate the sandals or flip flops
And
that Judge
I'm
Cordova.
sorry, but did you say Judge? Judge Cordova?
That's his name. His first name is Judge. Yeah, it was. I had to read that a few times earlier, but his first name is just Judge.
It's like, well, he's definitely
No.
working with the cop.
Thanks for putting that out for the listeners, though. But yeah, Judge. Um, isn't there an actor named Judge Reinhold? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure there is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Judge.
But look at that. I mean, come on. Her sandals. We assume they were her sandals. These sandals were found literally 100, like not even what, 200 feet from the house.
So she either had just left the home or she was on the way back.
All the way back. I think she was probably on the way back.
Yeah.
Um, that brings us to my next point here is that the police eventually caught the Medina house robbers. So the running theories were Lacey interrupted the Medina house robbery. Those robbers panicked. They kidnapped her and killed her and then dumped her in the bay after knowing from the media that
Yeah,
stuff was already down there and that they were thinking he was doing it.
100%.
New evidence shows that Lacey confronted the Medina burglars and that there were other men helping them besides the main two robbers. The main two robbers were Stephen Todd and Donald Pierce. They were the two main robbers, okay? The Maldonados came forward and they reported this to police, but they were never called to testify in Scott's trial. But the Maldonados, Helen and Homer, what a name, right? Helen and Homer Maldonado, they lived in the neighborhood. They were driving by. They saw Lacey walking the dog between 9:50 and 10 a.m. that morning. Remember, Scott left at 9:30. They claim to have identified the home burglars. They were driving a tan van and they saw them at the gas station down the road. Pretend you're Homer and Helen. You're driving by in this neighborhood. You see this pregnant woman walking this dog, fighting with this dog. Then you
Mhm.
pull into the gas station and then you see these unsavory looking guys driving a tan van. So they later, the Maldonados, saw Stephen Todd and Donald Pierce in the newspaper about the robbery, and they were like, those were the guys we saw at the gas station. And they showed receipts to show what time they were at the gas station to kind of line things up for the police, but they were never called to testify at Scott's trial. And then another eyewitness, Tony Freitas, documented he saw Lacey walking the dog around 10 a.m. These people were never brought to trial.
Yeah, because it doesn't fit the narrative, and if they were, the police were going to actually have to look into this, and in their minds, the case was closed.
And not only that, Jenna, but there was a Lieutenant Xavier Aponte. He has this report that he provided to the Modesto police regarding Lacey Peterson witnessing Stephen Todd committing the Medina burglary on December 24th, 2002. Um, here from the LA Innocence Project documents, I have a screenshot here. I'll share this tab here. The defense believes the items requested below exist based on the following information. Among the 43,000 pages of discovery given to Mr. Peterson's defense team, a single entry in an MPD or Modesto Police Department tip sheet documented a call from Lieutenant Aponte on January 22nd, 2003. So this is not even a month after Laci goes missing. The entry on the tip sheet states 909-273-2901 CRC Norco received info from Sean Tenbrink, inmate. This guy's name's going to come up later. He spoke to his brother Adam, who said Steve Todd said Laci witnessed him breaking in. Could not give date or time. Aponte has further info. Quotation ends there. That's key information. Now, why did I say Sean Tenbrink and Adam Tenbrink
Yeah.
are important to remember? Let's talk about Laci's watch.
The watch.
So, Laci inherited a Croton diamond watch from her grandmother. Scott talks about it in his affidavit that they had tried selling it on eBay. They weren't able to sell it. To their knowledge, she was wearing it the day she went missing. Laci's Croton watch turned up at a pawn shop, and through research, they found out that it was pawned by a woman named Donna Renfro on December 31st, 2002. There is no evidence to suggest that the police followed up with Donna Renfro or the pawn shop. The police obtained the watch from the pawn shop, but it's unclear where that evidence is.
Yeah, where's the watch?
And so the Modesto police did go and get that watch, but nobody knows where it is. And clearly the defense didn't know about this.
And they never interviewed Donna.
So Donna was known to police for her methamphetamine manufacturing, and she actually lived with a relative of those two brothers. The Sean Tenbrink and Adam Tenbrink. She lived with a relative of those two men and a known associate of a man named Jason Nolan and other methamphetamine users and dealers in the airport district, which remember is only a few blocks south of where Laci lives.
District that Laci didn't like the people who were living there walking down her street, the homeless vagrants.
Okay, so this is where I feel like Candace Owens right now, because we're getting into the nitty gritty here, Jenna. You ready for this? On January 6th, 2003, 2 days after Laci's episode aired on America's Most Wanted, someone called the tip line and reported hearing Jason Nolan, who Donna Renfro is a known associate of, bragging, quote, when they did it, they thought it would just be another murder case. And now it's a big case all over TV, and they're blaming the husband and getting all the attention. Coincidence? I think.
Yeah, this is just doesn't sit right with me. Let me ask you this, Jackie. If Scott killed her and dumped her body in the bay, then how did Donna get a hold of her watch and pawn it?
Here's the thing. There's no proof that that's Laci's exact watch, but it was the only watch that fit that description that was pawned in the last 6 months of her disappearance.
Yeah, and I mean
on December 31st.
Yeah. The brothers saying about, oh, it's a big case.
And then they're having a jail call and they're saying that Laci saw one of the robbers.
Everything about the robbery
kind of lining up, Jenna.
Lines up with what Scott was saying, with the neighborhood witnesses witnessing her with the dog, the people from the airport district down the street. Everything for this is lining up, and the police never looked into one single fucking thing. Nothing.
And it pisses me off that they went and got her watch and then never turned it over to the defense.
Probably gone. It's probably missing evidence. You know when the police are like, that file, or like, yeah, those clothes, we got rid of it. I don't know where they are. They do that all the time.
And that's the thing. Like, I have so much respect for law enforcement and detectives, but we've been crime junkies long enough to know that Occam's razor runs rampant in the detective world. The most obvious answer is the answer to them. And if it's a nail, they're the hammer. And Scott was the nail and they were the hammer, and they were hammering it down everybody's throats. The media ate this story up. And really, I'm sorry, this is pretty compelling to me.
And you have to think that the Rocha family is running on pure emotions, and
I don't blame them
they
for
are
how they
not
feel about that.
thinking
I
with
don't.
logic. Like,
Yeah.
they want justice for Laci. Now the cops are telling them it was her husband, your son-in-law, he definitely did it. Well, they're very emotional right now. Like, they're not thinking clearly. So they're like, yeah, okay. And then the cops are feeding it down their throat, and they couldn't think outside of this picture of Scott either. And it's just like logic was lost here.
And honestly, you'd have to believe that Scott Peterson is the most unluckiest man on the planet to have had this affair going on, and then his wife turns up missing after he lied and told his mistress, "Oh, my wife's dead. This is my first." I mean, you have to believe that those things were just all coincidence too.
Yeah,
However,
yeah, fellas, if you're gonna have an affair, just first of all, probably shouldn't be doing that. But second of all, don't even use the excuse that your
that
wife
your wife's
died.
dead, just in case she turns up dead.
Just pick something else. There's
Learn from
plenty.
Scott Peterson, right? But however, I can't ignore the coincidences here with the airport people, the airport area people, and those
Mhm.
connections and the Croton watch. If that is truly Lacey's watch, how the fuck did that lady get it?
Yeah. Yeah, the robbery and the robberies in the neighborhood. And this was 2002. So unfortunately, there was no Ring doorbell cameras or security cameras, because I guarantee you,
Good
Jackie, if
point.
there was,
Wait,
they
no.
would have they would have
Yeah.
caught all of this. They would
Yeah.
have caught her walking the dog, like exactly what time it was. They may have even caught that brown van going down the street. And it's just like, it's so unfortunate that there was none of that at that time. I think
Now,
it would
they
have helped.
did find a tan van that matched the description of the robber's vehicle, the Medina robber's vehicle.
Mhm.
And I did find documentation that they did test the mattress that was found in there, because I remember what in the last few years they were saying, oh, maybe Lacey was like in that van. There
Mhm.
was no trace of blood
Mhm.
on the mattress. There was a
No.
faint positive that came up, but then further testing revealed there was no blood. And then there was other reports about scholarly articles on how fires can change human DNA and things. So I
Yeah.
don't think they're able to conclude if there was ever any blood on that mattress. But I'm sorry, there was more to investigate in this case that didn't happen. And that is what Scott maintains. I
Mhm.
don't know if anyone watched the special last year where he did a prison interview, and they asked him what he thought happened to her, and he does wholeheartedly believe she interrupted the robbery and those men took her. And Jenna, we were talking about this before we started recording, but what always, 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 always rubbed me weird was the dog, right? Why would you, first off, why would you feign kidnapping your wife in broad daylight?
Yeah.
One. And two, why would you just let the dog roam like that?
There was no reason for that. There was no if even like if he
Why
would.
wouldn't you have both of them get in the, like, if you're assuming Scott left at 9:30, circled around, came back at 10 o'clock and said to Lacey, "Oh, get in the car," why wouldn't she bring the dog in with her? And
Right.
then
And
he could deal with the dog later. You know what I'm saying? Like, after he
what
kills her, if,
yeah, if
you know,
you're
we're
about
saying
to
that's what he
kill
did.
someone, you don't want to draw attention to your
And you don't
house
wanna deal
or
with a
yourself.
dog.
So why are you going to leave your dog outside on it? Of course, if it's been hours and the dog's barking or that's out of character, the neighbors are going to come over and be like, and see if your dog is okay. So that doesn't make sense either.
Never made sense to me, because if I'm Scott Peterson and I wanna unalive my wife like that, why would I wait till she's going out for a morning walk with the, why would I have her walk the dog? Why wouldn't I just do it
Before that, like
sleep?
while she
I
was
don't know.
sleeping.
Like, why would you do it at that exact moment? And then
Yeah.
the fact that the dog was running alone by itself with the leash and the neighbor saw it and put it in the backyard. Like, if I'm Scott and I circled back around and I said, "Oh, Lacey, get in the car," and like try to lure her in the car, I'd have her get in with the dog too. That never added
Yeah.
up to me. I'm sorry. And you know how people are with their dogs? You could be the most heinous criminal that would chop people up, but you might not hurt an animal.
Right, so why leave it unattended outside?
I don't think Scott would have left the dog unattended. I think he would have been like, "Bring the dog."
So, I just wanna bring up the point of how many cases do we hear where a woman comes home in the middle of a home invasion or a robbery and the robbers are surprised and then they have to kill
Mhm.
her? Like,
Yes.
it's common. So that could have happened as well. The robbers could have been robbing her own house. Maybe the robbers put the dog outside
Well, and that's another thing
so
he
that the dog wouldn't,
well,
go after
he
them.
brought up the Brita filter. She was replacing a Brita filter, and the way everything was left in the house was as if she got interrupted
Yeah.
replacing the Brita filter, and he's like, "The police never even looked at the fingerprints on the glasses."
No.
He's like, "She wouldn't have left that project unfinished." He's like, "I wonder if she got interrupted," you know? And these are just things he's pointing out that, like, they never looked into. And again, we are reading what Scott Peterson wrote a few years ago. Um, it's in a lot of detail
Mhm.
that I can't imagine you'd make up, but we do
No.
know him to make things up, so it's like
We're not saying that Scott is a
you're not
wonderful
saying he's an
person.
angel.
He was a bad husband and a
Yeah.
liar, and that really doesn't have anything to do with her disappearance and murder. I mean, people just and tons of people have affairs. That doesn't make you a killer.
It gives
So,
motive, but we still had no proof he did anything to
absolutely,
her.
absolutely no proof. I mean,
Cadaver dogs did not get hits in the house, and also they were saying at trial that he loaded her up in his truck, her dead body in his
yeah.
truck, and, the cadaver dogs actually were never asked to be brought into the truck at all or sniff the bed.
Of
So
course they weren't because they
right.
probably wouldn't have found anything.
And that's what they were pointing out. They have documentation to support that the lady that takes care of the cadaver dogs, she was never asked to investigate the bed of the
I
truck.
mean, that sounds weird to me. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't they do that?
And then the clothes, how he washed his clothes, he had a reason for that. He used to work in the restaurant business. Lacey trained him years ago. You know, when you get home, wash your clothes because you stink. So he's like, I came home from fishing. I immediately put my clothes in the washer and washed them. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't even think she was missing at that point. And they did swab the inside of the washing machine to see if there was any blood, and they didn't
Mhm.
find anything. So,
No, never. They never found blood.
yeah. So I think we learned a lot today.
Yes.
And
So
we're just pushing you guys to ask questions. Don't always believe what Nancy Grace is telling you. Don't always believe the version of events you get on TV.
the media sensationalizes everything and they put the same message across all platforms. So that is why we always do our independent research and we think outside the box on these cases.
A friendly reminder, we don't get paid to do this.
No.
We lose time and money when we research these cases, but we do it because we love it. And we're not getting paid by anybody. We have
No.
no agenda here other than we just want to encourage you guys to think outside the box.
Mhm.
Look at the actual documents that are out there. See for yourself. That's all we're trying to do here.
No. But the bottom line is there was so much reasonable doubt in this case. If Jackie and I were on the jury, that would have been a hung jury or that we would not have convicted the man.
No.
That couldn't be. They were biased. And
I
it's
think they tried to get it moved, or maybe they did. And
maybe.
it was impossible at that point, and I think they brought that up too in the habeas corpus filing that it was just everyone knew about it. Everyone. They knew about Amber. I mean, the moment I think anyone heard about Amber, it was over for him.
I agree.
Over.
Yeah.
Over. It was done when she came out of the woodwork. Done.
And it's just people think emotionally instead of logically or
Mm.
factually. And that's the way Jackie and I think about these cases. We use facts and logic and circumstantial evidence is not good enough for us in any of these cases, And unfortunately for Scott, I don't know if we'll ever know Jackie the truth. I don't know unless years down the road, one of those robbers or somebody knows something and has actual evidence or, the LA Innocence Project gets somewhere with this, but I don't know if we'll ever know the truth.
I don't either. And I heard that they did try to test some, was it tape that was on
Oh,
her body?
yeah,
I don't believe they found anything on that, did they?
I don't believe so.
So, a 15-inch piece of duct tape found on Lacey Peterson's pants was recently retested for DNA as part of Scott Peterson's bid for a new trial, with results submitted under seal in August 2024. But no public results have been announced, leaving uncertainty about its significance, though previous DNA testing found no profile. So, I do remember that last year they were hoping to have this tape found on Lacey's pants
Yeah,
tested for DNA. It sounds to me like nothing has been publicly made. There's been no public announcement about whether or not they got a DNA profile on it or if it was negative for Scott. Because think about it, if Scott's DNA is not on that tape, he didn't do it. Case closed because that tape only got on her by whoever threw her in that bay. But if they're not able to even get DNA off of it, you can't prove anything. So
yeah,
that would probably be the only way I think he could get off.
yeah, yeah. And doesn't seem like that's an urgent matter to anyone.
No. But right now, everything is pending as far as we know. And that is our deep dive into why we think we should start thinking outside the box about the Lacey Peterson case. Maybe give Scott a little bit of a chance. You don't have to like the guy, but
No, but be fair in
how you look at the case.
yeah, yeah. And if you guys liked this deep dive into our opinions on this case, we can certainly do it with other cases as well. If you like this extra special part 2 with the deep dive, and we will definitely continue to do them.
Thank you for listening. We hope you learned something new today. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you in the new year.